Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyate Desatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinatarine Hare Krishna. So today's the shlokas are big and also the purport is longer. So we will try to finish the reading, chanting the shloka and purport. If time permits, we can discuss a little bit. Otherwise, we can discuss tomorrow more. Okay, so let us see. These are almost 3.5 words. Okay. Yatro paramate chittam
Yatro paramate chittam
niruddham yoga sevaya
niruddham yoga sevaya
yatra chaivatmanatmanam
yatra chaivatmanatmanam
pasyanatmani tushyati
pasyanatmani tushyati
sukham atyantikam yattad
sukham atyanikam yatnikam tam
buddhi grahyam atindriyam
yatad buddhi grahyam atindriyam
veti yatra na chaivayam
vedi yatra na chaivayam
stita chalati tattvata
sthitaschalati tatvata
yam latva chaparam labam
yam latva chaparam labhyam
manyate nadhikam tataha
manyate nadikam tata
yasmin anistato na dukkhena
yasmin sthito na dukkhena
gurunapi vichalyate
gurunapi vichalyate
tadvidya dukkha sanyogam
tam vidya dukkha sanyoga
viyogam yoga samnitam.
viyogam yoga samnitam.
Please chant somebody.
यत्रो परमिते चित्तं निर्धूतं योगसेवया यत्र चैवात्म आत्मानं पश्यन् आत्मनि तुष्यति सुखम् आत्यन्तिकं यत्तद् बुद्धिग्राह्यम् अतीन्द्रियं वेत्ति यत्र न चैवायं स्थितश्चलति तत्त्वतः यं लब्ध्वा चापरं लाभं मन्यते नाधिकं ततः यस्मिन् स्थितो न दुःखेन गुरुणापि विचार्यते तं विद्या दुःखसंयोग वियोगं योगसंज्ञितम्.
Anyone wants to try? Okay. So let's read the translation and purport today. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joy state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. Upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such position, one is never shaken even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport. By the practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concept. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that yogi realizes the super soul through transcendental mind and intelligence without any of the misgiving of identifying the self with the super self. Yoga practice is more or less based on principles of Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the super soul, and the monists think this is to be liberation, but they do not understand the real purpose of Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and the knower is not accepted by non-dualist, but in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental senses is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of yoga system. The great sages declare in the Yoga Sutra 4.33, Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanam Pratipravashah Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishta Va Chiti Saktir Iti. This Chit Shakti or internal potency is transcendental. Puru Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, at the end attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist, but according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is internal and transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In other words, Lord Chaitanya, words of Lord Chaitanya, the state of affairs is called Cheto Darpana Marchanam, or clearance of impure mirror of mind. This clearance is actually liberation or Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapana. The theory of Nirvana also preliminary corresponds to this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called Swarupena Vyavastita. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situation in this verse. After nirvana or material cessation, there is manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In other words, Bhagavatam, Swarupena Vyavastita. This is the real life of living entity. Maya or illusion is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts these by the words Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishtha Na Chitti Shakti Riti. This Chit Shakti or transcendental pleasure is real life. This is confirmed in Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12. So, Anandamayo Abhyasa, this natural transcendental pleasure, is the ultimate goal of yoga and easily achieved by execution of devotional service or Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi called Sampradnyata Samadhi and Asampradnyata Samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researches, he is said to have achieved Sampradnyata Samadhi. The Asampradnyata Samadhi, there is no longer any connection with the mundane pleasure. For one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi once is situated in this transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today, so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by siddhis, perfections in the process of yoga, are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection as stated in this verse. Persons therefore indulging in make show practice of gymnastic feat or siddhi should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire to have any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, but there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demand of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure bhakti yoga or Krishna in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is call us towards incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, even death of the most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.14. Agama apayeno nityastama titikshava bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves highest perfection in the yoga system. So this Krishna, after explaining the how to do the yoga and discipline the mental activity and controlling the mind, when the yogi reaches to the stage of samadhi. So he is explaining the stage of samadhi in this to 3.5 shlokas. And the 23rd is only one line. The next line is in the other part. But here in the 23rd line, Krishna explains that this is the real freedom from the material miseries. Right? So the goal of yoga is to attain is to understand our real position, and then sukham atyadigam, that gives the the maximum happiness, you can say. And from this the person is not bewildered again. And when he achieves this state, he thinks that there is nothing more than this, and then he is happy. So how he derives the happiness? He derives the happiness from the transcendental position or transcendental senses, right? So that's why when the yogis reach the samadhi stage, they are in longer time in this stage. So we also see different pastimes in Chaitanya Charitamrita and of the devotees who are in samadhi. So, so these transcendental senses, right, and enjoying the transcendental bliss or happiness. There are examples. Like Sanatan Goswami's example is there when he was Sanatan Goswami or Rupa Goswami, one of the Goswami, when he was on the bank of the lake and he was in samadhi and he was focusing on the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Right. So there are examples when the devotees are focusing, meditating on the transcendental pleasures, and say they offer hot kheer to the Lord, and they try to test if it is too hot. Though they are doing in the samadhi and manas, then but when their fingers get burnt. So that is, this transcendental happiness or realizations are actually possible if we attain that stage, right? So two types of samadhi also Srila Prabhupada mentions that when we are using an object to go into a samadhi, a physical object in front of us, and when without the object we can internally go into the samadhi. So based on that, there are two types. So we can see that this process of hatha yoga and practicing requires a lot of endeavors. And to reach that stage of samadhi through this yoga is also not very easy. So Srila Prabhupada mentions at the end that because to control the mind and the senses completely and then focus on the super soul, identifying the super soul as different from the soul and superior to the soul, takes a lot of efforts. But if once he goes in that state, he's never shaken. But Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that when a person is serious in Krishna consciousness, he's engaging all his time, body, mind, soul, speech, everything in the service of Krishna. So he is already into samadhi. already into trance, and he is also experiencing the bliss. With how he is experiencing bliss, he uses his hands and his body in the service of the Lord, and while doing that service, he gets the pleasure. How is this pleasure experience? This pleasure experienced by satisfaction, by doing some service in temple or somewhere without any selfish motive. We get satisfaction, and that satisfaction is such that we don't want anything in return. From that we get the happiness. That is the happiness or bliss that comes from the service. That's why the service is very important, and Srila Prabhupada mentions that. That's why the Krishna consciousness person is very stable, or he does not deviate from it. Even if there are so many problems, he is still able to continue this because of this higher test. So this is what Krishna is trying to tell this samadhi stage. And then Krishna will also give some more discussions about how this should be practiced. And that we'll try to see tomorrow. If required, we can little bit check today's verse also. Thank you very much. I think we'll stop here today. Thank you very much for joining. Let's see tomorrow some more details about this verse and then go to the next verse. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Hare
Hare
Krishna, thank you.